Everyone. So today I thought we would do something extra simple. So we're going to be drawing water. So go ahead and grab a pencil. A pencil really is preferable for this one, but it can be any kind of pencil just because they're a little easier to blend. So once you have a pencil and a piece of paper, or a pen, even that can work too. You just have to be really careful to draw super lightly so that you don't have something super dark to blend out. But once you have that, what I want you to imagine is netting, like stretched apart, like some kind of net, because that's kind of what the surface of water looks like. You have these big open shapes and then thin spaces in between them. So go ahead and start drawing those shapes. And as you can see, they don't all need to look the same. Mine are different. They're sort of irregular. They're different sizes and different general shapes, but general, they're kind of like they're like a soft diamond shape. So go ahead and just start drawing those all over your paper and leave sort of a thin gap in between each one. As you can see, I hope you can see more or less what I'm drawing. I know it might be kind of tricky, but I'm drawing it light for a reason, and it's so that we can blend it out later. So just do those. And you can also leave wider spaces and fill them in with smaller shapes, kind of like this. Because water is always in motion, so it's never quite a regular shape. But just as you get closer to the viewer, you know, make your shapes a little bit bigger and bigger, as if you're getting closer to the surface of the water, as if this bottom part of the page is in the front and these further away parts are more in the back. So in the back of the paper, you can draw smaller shapes, and you can also draw less regular shapes. Generally, it's pretty free form. You just want to make sure that you have kind of a feeling of that netting, like I mentioned, because that's just sort of the way that water moves. It reflects the light in these little waves. You can also picture sand dunes if it's easier for you to picture something in 3 dimensions rather than 2. But to me, this looks kind of like a fence or something. But once you have all of your shapes sort of laid out, and this doesn't have to be perfect, you can add more later, just go ahead and start gently filling each shape in with, I would say, like a medium pressure. So you can see I'm pressing harder. And the reason for that is that I want to kind of blur out the edge of this shape. But it doesn't have to be super precise. Just make sure that you have it all filled in. And just as with the yoga practice, you know, mindfulness is something that can be found really easily in drawing. So as you draw, just go ahead and really listen to the sound of the pencil on the paper and pay attention to the motion your hand makes as you move from one edge of your shape to the other. And then even, especially if you have pencil, you can do this, but you can take your finger and sort of blur out that edge a little more. Just keep going, filling in the rest of your big shapes. I find it's easier to use the side of the pencil to do this rather than the top. because you can move with your whole arm and sort of do a wider sweeping motion rather than this where you're moving your wrist or your fingers, so you have not as much of a range of motion. As these shapes begin to come together, to me this is where it starts to look like water, like the surface of water. But we're going to be adding more details after this as well. So go ahead and just keep filling your shapes. Try to keep the pressure as even as possible. Again, yours probably looks nothing like mine in terms of which shapes you've made, but we can all connect over our technique, which is, sort of gentle, even pressure. And you can see I left that one open so I could sort of lighten as I went down to blend it out. Because the thing about these sort of like small waves is that they generally have like a little thin white line around them of light that shows where their edges are, and then they blend into the rest of the water. So these darker shapes, we're going to be blending out into the lighter surrounding area. And that'll help it all come together. Because as you can see, your hand may, if you're like me and you rest your hand on the paper, it might already be doing some of the work for you as far as blending goes. So you can see kind of we have this sort of, it almost looks like an animal pattern, like a giraffe or something. But that's because we have this strong contrast between our area of shapes and the surrounding area. So once you're done filling all of those in, which I'm almost done, go around them and with sort of a lighter touch, fill in the rest of your surroundings, the rest of the page, but leave a thin white area around, and you don't need to use an eraser, I'm just doing it to show you, but a thin white area around each shape to show where those waves are. So now we're going to be pressing really lightly, trying to do slightly lighter than the color inside these shapes, or the shade inside these shapes rather. And this is going to look a lot softer because we don't have an outline. But if you ever feel like, oh, actually these look pretty similar, all you need to do is go in again and fill in the center, or fill in your shape a little darker. It's much easier to add on more darkness than it is to lighten things back up with most mediums. So just keep that in mind and keep a light touch. But as we're making these, sort of soft organic shapes, think about the flexibility of water. Think about how, it can adapt to any shape in any place, and it exists all over the world in many, many different forms. Think about your own power to be adaptable. How can you be adaptable like water is? And as you can see, we're almost done filling out this outer edge. We still have this light color surrounding everything. So now what we can do is go back through and even things out, and also create smaller shapes inside of our larger shapes. Because even within these sort of planes, these flat looking areas, there is a lot of variation, and there's almost an endless amount of detail that you can add inside these things. Because like I mentioned before, water is constantly changing. It's constantly making new shapes. So go ahead and go through and add some detail. These can just be really, really abstract shapes in the general area of where you drew your original lines. And you can see my pencil is running out a little, so I'm going to switch to a different one real quick. That one's actually a little hard. Try this one. But again, this is a pretty abstract project. You don't need to be doing something that looks perfect or looks exactly like a picture of water that you saw, or like it could be a picture of water. The point of this here is to learn a new technique and to contemplate, what that means in our lives. What can we learn from drawing? What can we learn from water? Can we learn to be flexible? Can we learn to be patient, adaptable, tolerant? You've probably heard it said more than once that humans are, 90 or 70 or whatever percentage water. So it really is, well, not only metaphorically, but literally part of us. Something you can connect with. But as you can see, as I'm starting to add these darker shades into the waves, especially I'm working from the bottom up because you're going to see more detail in what's close to you than what's further away. So this can also add to that illusion that we're seeing this in perspective. But you can also jump outside the lines, like I mentioned before, and make more shapes between your larger areas, just to add a little bit of dimension and interest. But then as you go, you know, especially if you're using a pencil, you can go through again and start to blend all these different shades together. It's up to you how much contrast you want to have between your shapes, between different areas of the water, or the different patterns you made within these larger waves. But if you want to add just a little bit of blending, go right ahead. This works for any pencil. I'm using kind of a soft one so I can get darker shades now. This also, darkening around the edges, helps to create that illusion of the little bright lines that I mentioned before being around these different waves. And if you have an eraser, one extra detail you can add is to take the corner of it, or just take the end of it if it's a pencil eraser. I'm going to gently go around where you drew your shapes to create kind of a highlight. You'll also notice on pictures of water that there are some highlights that sort of crisscross these areas because the light is breaking through down into the water. And so you can see that sort of same pattern of a net almost forming underneath the water. So you can also indicate that a little bit with your eraser if you feel like. And you, like I said, you can use this kind of eraser, this block eraser, or if you're using a mechanical pencil or just a normal pencil, you can also use the end of that. It works just as well. I have this one here. You can see it just picks up a lot of that edges. So here, like I mentioned before, normally it's fairly difficult to add light back on, but because we're creating these clean lines instead of trying to, you know, blend more subtly, it's a little easier to accomplish. And those differences can be really subtle, but hopefully you can see here where I've made a few little lighter lines where there are highlights. But yeah, like I said, this is sort of something that you can almost endlessly work on and blend, which to me can be kind of fun and relaxing because there's no set endpoint. There's no place where you're like, okay, I'm done. There's no boxes to check. It's just something that you can have fun with. Very low pressure, low stress. Then as you go backward, you may also connect your different shapes because you're not, though, just like there's more darkness up here in the front, there's also more brightness. There's more contrast in general. So as you move your way back on the page, you can start connecting your shapes a little more, or adding in other shapes to kind of blend them together to, again, try to show that these things are further away. Yeah, drawing water, like drawing most natural things, makes me think about growing, but it also makes me think about adaptability specifically. You know, a lot of us have had to adapt in the past few months and find new ways to live our lives. And that's a powerful thing. That's something that, you know, if you've done that, you should be grateful to yourself for it, because it is difficult. It isn't easy. But it's also a very rewarding thing to do. And not often there's something that you can find to be grateful for in that adaptation. Whether it's reaching out to friends that you haven't heard from in a while, finding new ways to connect, coming to these workshops every week, or just finding time for things that normally you would never consider even trying. Baking bread, making music, any number of things. Being adaptable, being like water, is part of us as people. It's one of the many things that makes us unique, is the ability to decide to change. And that's something that I think it's important to admire in ourselves and to be grateful for in ourselves. As you move, as you let your hands sort of wander across the page abstractly, you may find new shapes that you didn't expect or even intend to create, but that you like nonetheless, that feel like part of this whole. And that's again part of the fun of drawing something like this that has no set structure. So try to take that and run with it. Try to appreciate it. This is really, normally I say we're not going for perfect, but this is an area in which there really isn't any. There is no perfect. There's just whatever you're making, which is going to be beautiful. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this activity. And I hope that you can take the time to appreciate your own ability to adapt and move with whatever your surroundings happen to be, much like the water that's within you and around you.